So, people here in this session, we are going to discuss the XAT Verbal section, and the sole purpose of this video is to help you understand the pattern and the difficulty of the questions in the XAT Verbal. Now, we will have a look at last year's pattern. There were three sections last year with total time of 170 minutes. So, these three sections had a total time of 170 minutes. We are not taking into account the extra time that you get for the essay writing. That is a different part altogether. We're only focusing on the three sections, right? That is the three sections, and also of course the GK section would be a part of it, and you had a total time of 170 minutes. The GK was almost negligible, so you can say you can spend around 5 minutes in the GK section. And if you look at the effective distribution of questions and time, you will find that there were 24 questions in the verbal section, 21 questions in the decision making section, and 27 questions in the quant and the DI section. So I have written here the three sections had 24, that is verbal, 21, that is decision making, and quant and DI 27 questions respectively. To complete these, how many these are 72 questions. So overall 72 questions, and you had roughly 170 minutes. So I can just kick out 5 minutes for the GK. So I can say that roughly you have 55 minutes per section. If I if I if I suggest equal distribution of time per section, then you had roughly 55 minutes per section, which means basically that for the verbal section you had 55 minutes with 24 questions in that section. So you had roughly almost more than 2 minutes, significantly more than 2 minutes per question, and you can see almost 2.25 minutes you had per question. Now this is a very good time if you look at the overall distribution of the questions. Now people, that is remarkably different from the other verbal sections of the other exams. For example, if you look at the verbal section of CAT, the verbal section of IIFT, and the verbal section of the other exams like NMAT and SNAP, you'll find that the ZAT always has come up with the toughest verbal section. Uh, in fact, the fact that you have fewer questions than the other papers shows that the difficulty level has to be high or must be high, because you have fewer questions and you have more time to attempt those questions. So, what should the strategy be? I went through last year's ZAT paper. That is, when I say last year, I mean to say ZAT 17. So I did a thorough analysis of ZAT 17 paper, and I found that out of 24 questions in the ZAT 17, excuse me, my voice, out of 24 questions in ZAT 17, I would say that the higher percentage of questions were from the difficult category, in the sense that almost 30 to 35 questions, percentage of questions, 30 to 35% of questions were from the difficult category, and the rest could be categorized as either moderate or easy. So I can say moderate or easy comprised of almost 65 to 70% of the paper. It is very rare that a paper has almost 35 to 40% of difficult questions, which is usually the case with ZAT. Now the good thing is that because you have fewer questions and you have more time, you always have time to pick and choose, in the sense that if I have 24 questions and if I have 55 minutes for those 24 questions, I would take my own time, and from these 24 questions I would pick only those which I think are easy or moderate. Understand people, last year one of my students, he got around overall 37 something, and his percentile was 98.9, almost 99 percentile. So people understand that the moment you touch, usually you will find that inside the paper is so tough that people who cross 30 marks overall and with a double digit in each of the sections are guaranteed call from XLRI, HR, and BM program. So the idea should be that you should try to cross, depending on the difficulty of the paper, should try to cross 2 digit marks in each section. Try to go beyond 11 in verbal, try to go beyond 10 11 in the DM section, and try to go beyond 10 11 in the QADI section. Now this will ensure that your overall not only goes beyond 30 to 33, but also the sectionals are in the 2-digit range, which usually is the cutoff. The good thing with XAT is that they don't have very high cutoff for the sectionals. They say that if you have 90, sometimes mostly let's say 90 percentile in the individual sections, and the overall if you have, let's say, desired of, let's say, desired score of 32, 33, then you are likely to get calls from XLRI, and also the HR and the BM program both. So it is not a difficult paper. I mean, I would say that because you have more time per question, uh, even though the paper is slightly of a difficult nature, it is still easy for you to clear the cutoff. So how should the approach to the verbal section be? You have 24 questions. This year you had 24 questions, 55 minutes. Your approach should be that you have to cautiously read the question and ensure that you don't get negative. When you know that the question is difficult, you just skip it. I mean, I always tell this to my students that there is no need for you to take unnecessary guess and spoil your accuracy. So I will just go through last year's paper, right? Now, this is the first question that we had last year. It says, read the following statements and answer the questions that follows. And from the look, I get to know that which of the following options is best logical order of the above statements. So again, it's a paradigmal question. And let me first check whether it is a difficult question or an easy question. One option starts with 1, the other with 2, 2, 3, and 4. So I have almost 4 ways of opening the paragraph, either with 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And statement 1 says, this is Russia's wild west, though the mountains lie to the south of Moscow. So I don't know what this is, and therefore I think that one may not be the right opening of the paragraph. The other ways I can have 3. Here between the Black Caspian Seas is a, but if you look at the word here, again it is referring to a place. So I would not say that 3 is likely to start the paragraph, because I would not say here. People would be guessing as to what this here is. So again, I would say it is unlikely for me, for anyone to start a paragraph with the word here. Same goes with the fifth statement, which also has, which too has the word here. So I can eliminate these choices depending on, based on the fact that it is very difficult for someone to start a paragraph with the pronoun this and here. Now I have two options. One is 2 and 3, and they both start with option 2. The Caucasus Range has throughout history held Russians, especially fierce nationalists like this person, in fear and awe. So statement 2 in both the cases. Now what next? After 2 you have 3. Here between the Black and Caspian Seas is a land bridge where Europe gradually vanishes amid a 600-mile chain of mountains. And this is one possibility which I just read. The other possibility is 2, 4. 4 says, here since the 17th century Russian colonizers have tried to subdue congeries of proud peoples, Chechens, English, Ossets, right? And then it says here the Russians encountered Islam, right? So if you look at these two sentences, people, you will find that these two sentences must go together. Why? Because 4 says, here since the 17th century Russian colonizers have tried to subdue proud people. And here the Russians encountered Islam in both its moderation and implacability. Now you must understand that the Russians are trying to subdue proud people, and it is here that they must have come. See, these two are similar ideas. Why they are similar? Because they both speak about people. See, Islam is a religion of people. So when you talk about people, and if this text statement is also about people, it is quite likely that 4 and 5 will go together or must be kept together. Why? Because they are similar ideas. We have learned in parajumbles that you must always keep similar ideas together. So I know that 2 will definitely start the paragraph. So I have shortlisted option 2 and option 3. But when I go further, I feel that 2, 3 is a decent link. Even 2, 4 is a decent link. No one can stop me. The Caucasus is a range that throughout history held Russians in fear and awe. Then I can say here between the Black Caspian Seas is a land bridge. So I can have 2, 3, or I can say here since 17th century Russian. So I can say that 2, 3 and 2, 4, they both make sense. But the point is that I must have 4 and 5 together. Why? Because they form a common idea. Now, then you say this is Russia's Wild West. What can be Russia's Wild West, people? A geographical area, right? The geographical area can be a Wild West, correct? So if you look at this way here, you start with 2. It says the Caucasus Range has throughout history held Russians in awe. Here between, so the Caucasus Range, and then you have between the Black and the Caspian Sea is the land bridge where Europe gradually vanishes. And then you have, and if you understand people, the Caucasus Range is a mountainous area. Understand this. A bit of GK can be very useful in cracking the question. The Caucasus Range is a mountainous area, and once you cross the Caucasus Range, you come into the Asian part of Russia. So if you say Caucasus Range and then you speak about the 600-mile chain of mountains, then 2 and 3 make sense. Why? Because you introduce Caucasus and then you say that amid a 600-mile of mountain chains as high as 18,000 feet, there is Spangled Beauty, and this is Russia's Wild West, because the Spangled Beauty and the yawning and flat mileage of steppe lands. This is basically what we call as Wild West. So 2, 3, and 1 makes very good sense, and then you speak about the people. 2, 3, 1, 4, 5. Difficult question, people. See, this is a difficult question. If you don't know, you just leave the question, go to the next one. But don't waste your time taking wild guesses. Right? Let's go to the next question now. I will just scroll the paper here. This too is not an easy question, people. The above one was slightly difficult, right? And if I come to this, this is slightly manageable. Why? I will tell you why it is manageable. You must first have a look at the question. You start with 1, start with 1, start with 2, start with 3, start with 4. So again, you have almost 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences likely to start the paragraph. Now, one idea I always tell is that you keep questions of similar nature together. This is the first hint that you get. What makes fluorine react violently with cesium while its nearest neighbor neon is reluctant to react with anything? In other words, what gives the elements their properties? So if you look at 3 and 4, you find that, in other words, what exactly is the author expressing? In other words, he is expressing the idea which he has expressed in 4. What makes fluorine react violently with cesium while its nearest neighbor neon does not? In other words, what gives the elements their properties and what order lies below the surface of their seemingly random nature? This idea has been put in a question form here. And therefore, I know that 4 and 3 will be kept together. Why? Because in other words, which you find in statement 3, is reflecting nothing but what has already been expressed in statement 4. So when I say that 4, 3 is a pair, this option goes out, this option goes out, this option goes out, and I have to choose from 1 and 2 and 5. Now the task has become easier, right? Because in both the cases I have 4 and 3 kept together. Now the point is whether 1 will start the paragraph or whether 4 will start the paragraph. It looks quite plausible that 4 and 3 can start the paragraph. Let's try to create a logical arrangement in both the cases and try to find the answer. What makes fluorine react violently with cesium while its nearest neighbor neon is reluctant to react with anything? In other words, what gives the elements their properties and what order lies below the surface? The properties of the elements are due to. So what, now look at this. What gives the elements their properties? This is the question the author asks. And what are you doing? You are giving the answer here. Isn't it, people? What gives the elements their properties? The properties of the elements are due to electronic configuration. So can I say that 3, 2 is also a pair? So whatever the start of the sentence might be, one thing is quite certain, that 4, 3, 2 must be kept together. You must understand this. And what is happening in 5? This order has been broken down. Therefore, 5 goes out. See, people, I am always using a very logical approach. When you know that 4, 3, and 2 must be kept together, that means they must be kept together. So the only choice is 2, and therefore 2 is the right answer in the second case as well. So what do? You start like this. The periodic table orders the elements in a way that helps us understand why atoms behave as they do. Right? This is the opening sentence. You have introduced what? The periodic table. What makes fluorine react violently? Because fluorine in the periodic table is placed very close to neon. And that's why the table opens the idea. Then you have basically 2 scenarios, and the question posed in the third statement is answered by the second statement. 4, 3, 2 is a pair. Option 2 is the right answer. So I have a look at this paper and I feel that the second question was doable, the first was difficult. But people understand this. Even if you are not sure about it, you must always go with the easiest and logical approach. and you will find that it is easy to eliminate the options. Let's go to the next question now. This question says, read the following excerpt and answer the questions that follows. Fragrant with steam, where the days and nights were red, right? Okay, so fragrant with steam, the days and nights were red. So this is a poem, and people understand that the best way to understand a poem is to slightly read it from different ways. So the days and nights were fragrant with steam. This is what the author says. With many braziers in the beloved house of my father and mother. So the days and nights were fragrant, the beloved house of my father and mother. So I know that, okay, something memorable is being recalled by the author, right? So which of the options is the closest expression of the poet's feeling? So this is a very, very short question, and I have all the time in the world to see what which is the house was located in a beautiful settings, probably surrounded by flowers in the mountains. The house was located in a beautiful settings, probably surrounded by flowers in the mountains. But then fragrant with steam. So, fragrant with steam, and then you say, I hope I am getting this because I have downloaded the paper. I don't think that steam and mountains can go together. I mean, I doubt, so I will not choose one. It's highly unlikely. The ancestral home was probably the most important house in the community. But community again is a very, again, important and community are two words which make me slightly doubt what exactly is. See, understand the question is about the poet's feeling, and the community part is no more. I mean, it's not relevant. Why? Because the author is talking about his father and mother and his house, not about the community. So two definitely goes out. The poet fondly recalls the pleasant climate enjoyed day and night. It can be one of the choices. The poet misses the braziers and steam shed she had during her childhood. So this also is possible. Everything about the house felt special because of her parents. Now understand this, everything about the house felt special. Why? Because so you can say the poet fondly recalls, the poet misses the, about the house everything was special. They all three go well, but one thing is important there is that if you look at the fifth option, it says because of her parents love for her. See, understand, the idea of parents has not been captured by any of the options. 1 and 2 have gone out because they are talking about mountains and community, for which I don't have much evidence. 3 says the poet fondly recalls the pleasant climate. It's quite possible, but if you compare 3 with 5, 5 is still better. Why? Because the house is important, the parents are important, and the specialty of the house is because of the parents. So 5 has a better focus than 3, and same is the case with 4. So 5 is a better choice. Why? Because the author is focusing on the beloved house of the father and the mother, and the house basically was fragrant because of the presence of the parents, and not because the poet is missing the climate. And childhood, we don't have any option. Understand, people, childhood, again, we don't know whether the author enjoyed it during the childhood or during the teenage or during the manhood. We don't know. So again, fourth is not a good option. So you always compare the options, and while comparing, you will definitely find those subtle differences, and those subtle differences must be compared from what you have in the passage, and therefore 5 is the best choice. We have finished 3 questions, people, and I feel that at least out of these 3 questions, question number 2 and question number 3 was doable. One was slightly difficult, you could have left this. Let's go to the next one. This is the fourth question now. The current trend indicates that food and vegetable inflations continue to be, so this is not visible here, to be pain points. Let me write this down. It says the current trend indicates that food and vegetable inflations continue to be pain points. Food inflation rose to 7.79% in June from 7.47%, and vegetable inflation rose from 14.74, rose to this from that, which is basically from lower to higher. In the weeks ahead, the volatile food inflation will determine the course of overall inflation. For RBI too, the trend is a concern, since under the current agreement with the government, if the inflation exceeds 11%, it will have to explain to the government why it could not be contained. Now, the lower limit is 2%. Now, if you look at this question here, it's very simple to understand. I mean, but the question says which of the options is most appropriate. This is one of those questions. Again, it comes in the critical reasoning category. So far we have seen two questions from parajumbles, one question from you can say short paragraph. Uh, Again, it's a kind of critical reasoning question, and this too again is a critical reasoning question. So critical reasoning question does come in XAT, and there are good number of questions, and particularly of this kind, wherein as a assertion, assumption, and all these kind of things come. So which of the following options is the most appropriate? Now let's read this. The first paragraph states a cause, and the second illustrates the effect. It looks quite plausible because you get a feeling that the rise in the inflation is the cause, and it's quite possible that you might say the effect is what the RBI uh, for the RBI the trend is a concern. That means the RBI has become concerned, and what is the cause of this concern? The rise in the inflation. I mean, this is how you would reason, right? So you can always shortlist to option one. The first paragraph provides information and the second highlights potential application. Now, this is not an application by any standard. I mean, this is just, I would say, a reflection about what is happening here. The author says that the inflation has increased and the RBI is concerned about it. And if the inflation exceeds 11%, then it will have to explain to the government why it could not be contained. So rather than application, it is basically some kind of question is being raised. You know, so 2 definitely goes out. I can still hold 1, but I cannot hold 2 because 2 is not a good option. There is no application. 3 says the first para is an assertion and the second provides an illustration of that assertion. See, this is not, see, this talks about inflation, and this is not talking about any kind of illustration. See, inflation has increased. This is assertion, and the food inflation, for example, has increased from X to Y. Now, this is basically illustration of that assertion. So if I say inflation has increased, this is an assertion. And if I give example of that, that becomes an illustration. But this is one phenomenon and this is different phenomenon. So there's no illustration as such. So the word illustration is not correct. So we can kick out 3. Fourth says the first paragraph highlights inflation conditions, which is given, and the second hints at RBI's inefficiency. The second hints, understand, the second is not directly saying something, but it is hinting at RBI's inefficiency. Quite possible, so we can shortlist this. The first paragraph highlights pain points, the second contains, there is no remedy as such. There is no remedy. It says that if the government is not able to contain this, then it will have to give explanation. So fifth is not again fitting the relationship. Now the point is, what should we choose between 1 and 4? The first para states a cause, but then is it given that there is a cause-effect relationship, that the concern of the RBI is basically this is the effect. See, cause effect basically means one event must lead to the other. So if I have to if I have to get some kind of relationship, then I will draw this kind of statement. Pakistan, right? Pakistan, let's say, crossed the LOC, right? The Indian army fired at them. Now this is a better cause effect relationship, because what is the effect? Indian army firing at the Pakistan troops, and what was the cause? They crossed the LOC. But if you look here in this sentence, there is a trend. The trend is that inflation has increased and the RBI is concerned on. This is not technically an effect. This is basically a kind of reflection, a kind of response. A response, a reaction should not be taken as an effect. Understand this, people. This is basically the RBI's. I would say when I say that the RBI is concerned about it, this is basically the RBI's reflection, the RBI's mood. And secondly, if you look at the second part, the RBI too is concerned, and if the inflation exceeds 11%, it will have to explain to the government why it could not be contained. So basically it means that the RBI is actually responsible for maintaining inflation, and that is the reason why the word hints has come into picture. By making the see, this paragraph has two statements. The first is the RBI too is concerned about it, and secondly, if the inflation exceeds the RBI will have to give explanation to the government as to why. That means basically the first paragraph highlights inflation conditions, right? It is a condition, it is not a cause. And secondly, the second one hints at RBI's inefficiency. Why it is end? because the second part of the second paragraph is not being captured by the first option. The first option simply draws a cause effect relationship, but it is not technically a cause effect relationship. It is a condition, and that condition has basically got some kind of response. Effect technically means consequence, and understand the word affect and the word effect. So when I say the word effect, it means a consequence, and when I say the word affect, it means influence. The tragedy affects you means influences you, so you become concerned. But the tragedy is not resulting in something. It's not concretely giving some kind of consequence, and therefore the word effect is slightly awkward here. Fourth is the right choice and the correct answer, no doubt about it. Let's take the fifth question now. The fifth question says the serious study of, now this looks to be a vocabulary question. See, there is no order. That's what I tell my students, that in XAT you will not have any kind of order, that the first five questions would be from PJ, the next three would be from grammar. No, there would be random questions coming to you. So you must be smart in picking, and picking the question and then leaving it if you cannot solve it. So far we have seen four questions. I definitely agree that question number 1 and question number 4 were difficult, but question number 2 and question number 3 were very much doable. Moderate but doable. You could have got these two correct if you stick to the option elimination technique. Now let's read this. The serious study of popular films by critics is regularly credited with having rendered obsolete a once dominant view that popular mainstream films are inherently inferior to art films. Now please understand, this is a complicated language. The serious study of popular films by critics is regularly credited with having rendered what? Obsolete. What is obsolete? Unpopular. So the serious study of popular films is taken as an example of what? Of example that the once dominant, view that popular mainstream films are inherently inferior to art films. So art films is one category and popular films is one category, and once upon a time, uh, uh, the belief was that popular films are inferior to art films. This is why, because it says once dominant view. So once upon a time the view was that art films are better than popular films, but the author says that now critics are studying seriously popular films, and therefore the view that popular films are inferior to art films is obsolete. Are you getting this relationship? See, you must first create a logical relationship, only then you would be able to answer the question. So it says that yet, and then you have a contrast. That means this view is being presented with a contrasting notion or contrasting idea. Yet the change of attitude may be somewhat dash. Now this attitude may be somewhat, and you have to draw a contrast. That means it might be overstated. Correct? Because this blank can only be filled by overstated. How can you say for, into? No, you will not get this. So that means your option must have 3 in it. Are you getting my point, people? Your option must have 3 in it, only then it would make sense. So we have to fill the first blank with option 3 at least. So 1 has gone out, 4 has gone out. Although it is now academically respectable to analyze popular films, the fact that many critics feel compelled to rationalize their own action movies or mass market. If you are trying to rationalize something, that means you are trying to justify something, then you would have what for that kind of thing? Love for that kind of. See, you rationalize only that thing for which you have liking, right? So can I say dislike for would definitely go out? Are you getting my point? Dislike for will definitely go out. The fifth one we will never come. Penchant for, yes, can be the answer, because you have penchant for something. That means the fourth option has to be there, because you rationalize something for which you are having passion. So penchant for is definitely required, and therefore I get a feeling that for the fifth question we need to have both 3 and 4, and both 3 and 4 is there only in option 3. Even 2 does not have 4, even 5 does not have 4. So what I did, in the initial round of elimination, I said 3 is definitely required, and therefore 1 went out, and therefore 4 went out. And then when I went ahead, I found that you are compelled to rationalize their own dash. You rationalize something for which you have love. Unproductive will not fit, not appreciate will not fit, penchant for will fit, dislike. Why should they rationalize to why should they rationalize that for which they have dislike? So again, this is not fitting in, right? And secondly, there is no option which says that you must have 5. So the only option is 3 and 4. Easy question. I'm telling you people, this looks intimidating, but it is not difficult. If you read the question, if you bide your time, you'll find that this can be cracked. One of the easiest question in the paper, I would say. 3, 4, option 3 is the right choice for the 5th question. Let's go to the next one. So far I have seen that question number 2 was doable, question number 3 was doable, and question number 5 was doable. 2, 3, 5 were doable. And you have to get just 8 more marks to cross the cutoff. Read the stanza and answer the questions that follow. So it says here, invisible atoms coming together, revealing themselves in visible forms. So invisible atoms coming together, revealing themselves in invisible forms. Seeds are hugged by the earth, which renders them as gardens in bloom. And there, yonder means there. This is again an old English word, and that is known for throwing at you something which is archaic and obsolete, which render them as gardens in bloom. And their stars, are they not pearls floating on teeming seas, scattered yet strung together in orderly constellations, love binding them to one another, and each is perpetually seeking its like. So the author seems to be talking about the stars. I will read this again. Invisible atoms coming together, revealing themselves in visible forms. What could this refer to? To the stars, maybe. I'm guessing. Seeds are hugged by the earth, which renders them as gardens in bloom. So this could be something different because it is on the earth. So invisible atoms coming together, revealing themselves in visible forms. Seeds are hugged by the earth, which renders them as gardens in bloom. And their stars, are they not pearls floating on teeming seas, scattered yet strung together in orderly constellations, love binding to one another, and each is perpetually seeking its like. Okay, so let's try to see what exactly. There are two descriptions. One is what is happening on the earth, and what is there in the stars. And this is what the. So let's have a look at the question directly without wasting time and spread of the above stanza. So stars and seas are similar. Of course, it's quite possible. All rivers, but uh, the all rivers flow into the ocean is not something, because the author is not emphasizing on rivers flowing into the ocean. People understand this. This is the 6th question, and uh, I don't see that, because the author is talking about the stars. So this is not what the stars actually mean. Again, there is no unity and division message. Love dissolves all religious differences. Again, this goes out. Something invisible binds disparate objects. So stars and seas are similar, because the author has spoken about stars, he has spoken about seas, and he says, and the 5th option says something invisible binds disparate basically means different objects. Disparate means different in nature and kind. So something invisible binds different objects. Let me again read. If I can get some clue, I would mark it. I would simply leave it. It says here, invisible atoms coming together, revealing themselves in visible forms. Seeds are hugged by the earth, which renders them as gardens in bloom. And their stars, are they not pearls floating on teeming seas, scattered yet strung together in orderly constellations? People understand the seas here is not. It says here, and those stars, are they not pearls floating on teeming seas? So basically, the stars in the sky are not floating on teeming seas. In fact, they are floating in the sky, and the sky has been used. Um, the author has used the word seas for the sky, and therefore we should not take it literally. Scattered yet strung together in orderly constellations, love binding them to another, and each is perpetually seeking its like. Well, it's a difficult question, people, and I would say that if you don't know, you please leave it. I too am a little confused about it, but if all I have to mark, I would not mark stars and seas are similar, because the author is not having seas in mind. Understand? He says that the seas is basically the sky, and in the sky we have the stars moving. So it is not the right choice, definitely. So if I have to go by elimination, I would mark 4. Something invisible binds and disparate objects. Again, it's a difficult question, you can leave it, but if at all you mark, you go by elimination and you will definitely get the right answer. Let's go to the seventh. On Friday morning, a dieting supplement sales company Herbalife agreed to pay the US Federal Trade Commission $200 million fine. The FTC said Herbalife cheated hopeful salespeople out of hundreds of millions of dollars with a high pressure multi-level marketing scheme. Herbalife's stock received an immediate 15% increase following the above news. The company also announced that it would hire a second former FTC commissioner in a press release describing the terms of the settlement. Which of the following points would imply that the 15% increase in stock is fair? So there is something negative happening. What is that? That that the that dieting supplement company Herbalife has agreed to pay US Federal Trade Commission $200 fine. The fine must have been imposed by the court of law, right? The FTC said Herbalife cheated, right? And as a result of that, there has been 15% increase in the stock. And the question says which of the following points would imply that the 15% increase in stock price is fair? Cheating results in increase. So if I look at the options, people, I will not read everything, but I don't have any clue as to why. This is one of those difficult questions, and I don't have any answer for this as to why the right answer is the right answer. By the way, the one of the right answers says that the option is 4. Acknowledge deceit increase in acknowledgement of deceit. Increases the stock price of companies. This is the right answer, by the way. But again, compliance with court orders increases stock price, or is it acknowledgement of deceit? I feel that 4 and 5 both are equally good. So it's difficult for me. So I would say that fourth is the answer, but I don't know why. So this is one of those questions which you can leave. There's no need for you to unnecessarily think over it. Let's go to the next question. This is one of those easy questions, people. Understand this. This looks again a lengthy question. It's a critical reasoning question, but this is an easy question. How? Look at this. Worldwide, tomato is one of the most important crops because this crop can be adapted for cultivation in various environments, ranging from tropical to alpine regions. Its cultivation area is now expanding worldwide into not so productive regions. So what is happening now? The cultivation area of tomato is expanding worldwide, but it is expanding into not so productive regions. That means basically, if this is the current region, and if this region has expanded to this area is not so productive as what this area. That is what it means basically. So this is the cultivation. This is the area of cultivation where tomato has been cultivated so far, and this is basically the new area in which it is going in which it is being cultivated now, additional and new area, but this is not as productive as this one. This is what the question says. On the other hand, traditional cultivation areas, the most favorable for tomato cultivation with warm are contracting. So traditional areas are contracting. That means this area is basically contracting. Why? Because of environmental factors like salinity, drought, and soil erosion. So understand the traditional areas were more productive, but they are contracting, and the new areas that are coming up are not so productive. That means what? One thing is certain, because I am losing cultivation from the productive area and the new area that is getting added is not as productive, overall production of tomato is definitely decreasing. In recent years, per hectare production of tomato has decreased. Why? Because I am losing the old area, the traditional area, which had more productivity, and I'm replacing them with new area which are not so productive. So definitely that there is a net decrease, because this is giving me X, but this is giving me twice of X. I am replacing this new with the old, which is not so productive. That means definitely 3 is the right answer. Simple question. The point of wastage has not even come. You can just kick these options out. What is the wastage? The question says every year traditional cultivation is leading to what? Uh, uh, Environmental factors. We are losing 2 million hectares because of environmental factor. That doesn't mean it is wastage. Wastage means you are producing, you are cultivating, but it is somehow not getting utilized. So wastage option is basically absurd. And for increase, there is no reason to mark increase. And if you want to have a look at the fifth option, the answer is 3, by the way. If you want to have a look at the fifth option, the fifth says, uh, it says in recent years per hectare production has remained the same. How can you say it has remained the same? Easy question. One of the easiest of questions. So far we have come across at least 2 or 3 very, very easy question, people. Now look at the 10th question. I will just scroll it down a little. The 10th question says, carefully read the statements. Chatterjee loves books, Chatterjee loves books, Chatterjee loves books. Therefore, he reads them all the time. So this is one clause and this is the other clause, right? To separate one clause from the other, you can have a semicolon. So one is definitely right. One only, one and two only, one, two, and three only. So I can kick out four and two because one is definitely right. See, the rule book says that I can separate two independent ideas with a semicolon. You cannot stop me from doing that. And this is what one precisely does. It's a punctuation question, by the way. Chatterjee loves books, full stop. Therefore, he reads them all the time. So 2 is also correct because you can also separate two independent ideas with a full stop, right? So nothing is wrong with 2. So 1 and 2, right? So 1 also goes out. I have 1 and 2, or I have 1, 2, and 3. Correct, people? Now, Chatterjee loves books, and or you can separate two ideas by using a appropriate conjunction and then a comma. Two independent ideas can be separated by a semicolon or by a full stop or by an appropriate conjunction followed by a comma. So even this is correct. Chatterjee loves books and therefore reads them. So this is option 3 is basically not independent idea. You have a conjunction which is joining two verbs. The first verb is loves, the second verb is reads. So there are two verbs being joined by the conjunction and so Chatterjee loves books and reads them. So I love let's say cricket, correct? And play the game all the time. Nothing is wrong. Then you might wonder why we have therefore. Therefore is breaking the flow of the sentence and therefore you must put it in a comma. 3 is also right. 5th is the right answer. I should not discuss this too much. 11th question. Grotesque is related to macabre in a similar way as. So grotesque means something which is ugly and macabre is something which is sickly and therefore ugly. That means anything that is macabre has to be, in fact, basically macabre and grotesque are almost synonyms. Understand, this is how the relationship is. Whatever is macabre is basically death-like and therefore it has to be grotesque in the sense that everything that is macabre is basically grotesque. But everything grotesque is not necessarily macabre. But they are almost, in the same zone. They are almost synonymous, right? And if you look at this, classics is not necessarily ruins. This is not the relation. There must be synonymous relationship. Classical civilization may not always be in ruins. And the word classics is again huge. It has huge application and cannot be necessarily said that, whatever is classical has been ruined. So it is not the right relationship. In fact, marriage and funeral also goes out. Science and thanatology, I don't know what it means, but I am following the paper, so I would like to pick the one which appeals to me. Sorcery is concerned with black magic, and necromancy also is concerned to some extent with black magic. It's a kind of magical thing which you do. So they both are concerning, black magic and all those things. So I feel that 4th is the right option because of the word. I know that they are related to the way these are. History and history is basically human history. Paleontology is again it is concerned more with it is science. History, paleontology is a science. Understand this, in which you study the bones of animals. You dig deep below the earth and you find the ancient records of animals. So they are not related. But sorcery and necromancy are very closely related, the way grotesque and macabre are related. Again, if someone is good with vocabulary, they can manage this question. I will go to the 12th question now, the last question from the verbal ability part. Then we have 12 questions coming from directly reading comprehension. So again, XAT is known to give you questions which are based on similar words but very confusing. I mean, similar and confusing but having a different meaning. Now, in this question, we have the word affect and we have the word effect. Now, people, effect means consequence. Understand this. Effect means consequence, and affect means to influence. So the tragedy affected you, not affected you. So this effect is usually a noun form. This is basically a verb form. That's why you have the effects of First World War. Means what? The consequences of First World War. I was affected by the tragedy, because this is coming with the verb affected and therefore influenced. So if you want to simplify, replace affect with influence and replace effect with consequence, you will get the right answer. The suspension of the captain may dash the number of spectators. May affect. Why? It may influence. So can I say I can shortlist 1, 2, 3, but kick out 4 and 5? Are you getting my point, people? I have shortlisted. Why? Because it is influence. Can you replace it with consequence? No, you cannot. So I will shortlist 1, 2, 3. Why? Because they all have effect. Wherever I can use affect, I would use influence, and the meaning will come out. The suspension of the captain may influence the number of spectators. Means what? May have an effect on. May affect means what? May influence means what? The number of spectators may go down or high. You need a verb form. Understand this, people. Transportation's cost will directly affect the cost. Again, we need affect. Why? Because a verb form. So you have option 3. Straight away it fits the bill. Less than 20 seconds you need to solve this question. 3 is the answer. Very, very simple question. People, we have finished 12 questions in this section so far, and I will just give you the analysis of how many questions were really very, very easy. Question number 12 was very easy. And if you're competing at such a high level, question number 11th was also easy question. 2 questions very easy. Question number 10 was very easy. 3 questions very easy. Question number 9 was very easy. 4 questions very easy. Right? 8 was difficult. 7th was again an easy question. 5 question easy. This was difficult. uh, Fifth question was easy. 6 questions were doable. Fourth was difficult. And if I go little down, third was easy and second was easy. So out of 12 question, people, we have almost 3 RCs, because I know I cannot solve the entire paper. So far I have tried solving the entire paper. I have not come across more than 2 or 3 very difficult questions. Out of 12 questions, people, not more than 2 or 3 difficult questions I have had so far. Who says that XAT Verbal is very tough? I am solving the paper right in front of you. So it's not that it is very, very tough. You have to solve the paper. You have to understand the pattern. You must understand where are those easy pickings. XAT is like a test match on which uh, the bowler is not going to give you too much room for scoring runs. So you have to pick all those singles and doubles smartly, because you don't have rooms for sixes and fours, because the paper is tough. So you cannot score 6 and 4s. You have to just pick those singles and twos smartly. And how would you do those? By simply waiting for an easy question. And how will you do that? If you are patient. If you're not patient, you will never find the questions. Let's take this question now. It's taken me 60 years, but I had an epiphany recently. Everything without It's taken me 60 years, but I had an epiphany recently. Everything without exception requires additional energy in order to maintain itself. I knew this is the this in the abstract as the famous second law of thermodynamics, which states that everything is falling apart. This realization is not just the lament of a person getting older. Long ago, I learned that even the most inanimate things we know of, stone, iron columns, won't last long. So the author says everything is basically disappearing, vanishing, not vanishing or disappearing, but everything. So I will read this. What has surprised me recently is how unstable even the intangible is. What is intangible? So the author speaks about the tangibles here. That means basically the copper pipe, the gravel roads, a piece of paper, iron columns. Now he speaks that even the intangible is basically unstable. Keeping a website or a software program afloat is like keeping a yacht afloat. It is black hole for attention. I can understand why a mechanical device like a pump would break down because of moisture, rusts, metals, etc. But I wasn't thinking that a non-material world of bits would also degrade. What's is to break? Apparently, everything is to break, the author says. So in the first para, it says that everything is breaking down in the tangible world. Even in the intangible, everything is breaking down. Brand new computers will ossify, apps weaken, code corrodes, fresh software just released will immediately begin to fail. On their own, nothing you did. The more complex the gear, the more attention it will require. The natural inclination towards change is inescapable even for the most abstract entities we know. So even the abstractest of things basically will degrade and they need a change, the author says. And there is assault of the changing digital landscape. When everything around you is upgrading, this puts pressure on your digital system. You may not want to upgrade. Then it says here further, I used to upgrade my gear begrudgingly and at the last possible moment. You know how it goes, upgrade this and suddenly you need to upgrade that, which triggers upgrades everywhere. I would put it off for years because I had the experiences of one tiny upgrade of a minor part disrupting my entire working life. But as our personal technology is becoming more complex, more codependence upon peripherals, more like a living ecosystem, delaying upgrading is even more disruptive. So upgrading is basically inevitable. You have to do it. Why? Because if you don't upgrade, it's going to be very difficult for you. You know, it's going to be disruptive. Delaying upgrading is going to be disruptive, though you don't like it. The author says, right? I had the experience of one tiny upgrade of minor but disrupting my entire working life. If you neglect ongoing minor upgrades, the change backs up so much that eventually big upgrade reaches traumatic proportions. So keep on minor upgrades. Why? Because if you don't do that, the bigger upgrade would be traumatic for you. So I now see upgrading as a type of hygiene. You do it regularly to keep yourself technically healthy or tech healthy. Continual upgrades are so critical for. So this is what the author wants to say. We take this evolution as normal. Technological life if in the future will be a series of endless upgrades, and the rate of graduations is accelerating, right? Features shift, defaults disappear, menus morph. I will open up a software package I don't use every day expecting certain choice. The whole menus will have disappeared. No matter how long you have been using a tool, endless upgrades make you into a newbie. So the author says basically because you keep on upgrading, you're always a newbie, always a learner. That should keep us humble. That bears repeating. All of us will be endless newbies in the future simply trying to keep up. Here is why. First, most of the important technologies that will dominate life 30 years from now have not yet been invented. So naturally you will be a newbie to them. Second, because the new technology requires endless upgrades, you will remain in the newbie state forever. Third, because cycle of obsolescence is accelerating. The average lifespan of a phone app is merely 30 days. You won't have time to master anything before it is displaced. So you will remain in the newbie mode forever. Endless newbie. So what is the author's central point? Central message is that you have to keep on upgrading. He started with because the cycle of obsolescence. So the author has basically said that tangible things degrade, and he used laws of thermodynamics. Even the intangible ones will degrade. And then the question says, which of the following statements would the author agree with most? Correct? The first one says, the second law of thermodynamics states that things need more energy as they separate. The second law of thermodynamics is not basically, uh, uh, again, the author is not saying they need more energy. I mean, this is, if you go back to the passage, you will not find that second law of thermodynamics says that things need. I would rather basically, pick the one which is in tune with the central idea of understand this, agree with the most. So you also have to stick to the central idea of the passage. What exactly is the author trying to say or communicate? Upgradation, though simple, is disruptive. No, the author has not said it is disruptive. The author says you have to keep on upgrading. Why? Because that is how things will keep on changing. So fourth is not the right choice. In the next 30 years, your experience in upgrading will be greatly valued. Again, no. Upgradation is no longer an option but an obligation. See, it's a legal necessity. I mean, when you say option means it's a choice, whether you do it or not do it. The author says no, it's not a choice anymore. You have to do it, or else you will pay a huge price. So option 3 is in fact a very very strong choice. If you go up in the passage, you will not find much scope for saying that the second law of thermodynamics state things need more energy as they separate. And look at the third statement, is apt. Why? Because this is precisely what the author is discussing. It is not a choice anymore, it is an obligation. It's a legal necessity. In fact, it's a necessity. See, option obligation is basically a necessity. You have to buy, you have to do it. There is no other option. And that's why he keeps on saying, you have to basically keep on upgrading yourself. Otherwise, at the end you will realize that it says traumatic proportions. He has used that phrase, right? 3 is the right answer. Let's go to the next one. Which of the following quotes would the author agree with most? So, what we can't cure, we must endure. Again, can't cure. The author has nowhere said that something is there which we can't cure. So, fifth goes out. If you do not change, you will be changed. I do not change, but how can I be changed here? This is not relevant to the passage. If you look at options 1 and 2, they are good. Life is like riding a bicycle. In order to avoid falling, you must keep moving. Right? You cannot be constant. The only thing constant in life is change. So they both look very good. In 14th question, both 1 and 2 look very good. You must be the change you wish to see in the world. This is more of philosophical and moral thing. Out of 1 and 2, what would you choose? I mean, this makes the question difficult. Because one says life is like riding a bicycle. In order to avoid falling, you must keep moving. And second says the only thing constant in life is change. Now, you must look at this, that the author has described the pain of basically, or rather the cost of not upgrading. If you look at this, the author has described in the longest paragraph of the passage that look at this paragraph here. I used to upgrade my gear begrudgingly and at the and at the last possible moment. You know how it goes. Upgrade this, upgrade that. I would put it off for years, but I had the experience of one tiny upgrade of a minor part disrupting my entire working life. But as our technology becomes more complex, more codependence upon peripherals, more like a living ecosystem, delaying upgrading is even more disruptive. So if you delay upgrading, you are basically disrupting. If you neglect ongoing upgrades, the change backs so much that eventually big upgrade reaches dramatic proportions. So if you don't do it, you're going to pay a huge price for it. That is what the author says. And that is the reason why option 1 becomes better than option 2. It says here, life, see, when you say life is like riding a bicycle, in order to avoid falling, you must keep moving. So in order to basically get trapped of not upgrading, in order to pay a huge price for not upgrading, you must keep on upgrading. The only constant thing is life is change. The only thing, the author is not discussing that change is the only constant thing and the rest things are not changing. I mean, this is precisely where it slightly goes off track. 1 is better. Why? Because it captures that idea. A difficult question, but 1 is definitely better than 2. And if you have any doubts, people learn to leave the question. Let's go to the next one now. It says here, the CEO of a technology company was thinking of the following policies. Lifetime employment. If a CEO were to consult the author of the passage, which of the above policies should the author recommend? The author believes in retraining and regular training and retraining. So definitely 4th would be one of the choice which the author would recommend. So this goes out. Life is lifetime employment. The author would not recommend lifetime employment. Again, it goes out. So you have 2 or 4 or 3 or 4. But hire new competent employees and fire old incompetent employees. Of course, because old ones are not good for it. So 3 and 4 is better than 2 and 4. Promotion based, no. 3 and 4 is better. A simple application based question, an easy question. Even if you read the entire passage and you're able to solve only this question, this is again more than enough. Because we know that we have solved 7 questions from VA. This could be the 8th one from the RC part. Let's read the next one. Now I will read this passage here. It's a short passage. Writing is both my vocation and my avocation. You may wonder why I should write a genealogy. Well, to begin with, my story is interesting, right? And next, I am a mystery more so than a tree or a sunset or even a flash of lightning. But sadly, I am taken for granted by those who use me as if I were a mere incident and without background. This supercilious attitude relegates me to the level of commonplace. Supercilious basically means arrogant, thinking that the other things are inferior. This is a species of the grievous error in which mankind cannot too long persist without a peril. For as a wise man, G.K. Chesterton observed, we are perishing for want of wonder, not for want of wonders. This is a very, I'd say, insightful statement. Want of wonder means the wonder that you have from within, want of curiosity, rather than wonders, which are basically wonders of the world. So this is about curiosity within, and this is about basically wonders of the world outside you, the physical wonders. So we are lacking in curiosity, not in wonders of the world. I, simple though I appear to be, merit your wonder. I don't know what is I here because there is a question on this. I simple though I appear to be, merit your wonder and awe, and claim I shall attempt to prove. In fact, if you can understand me, no, that's too much to ask of anyone. If you can become aware of the miraculousness that I symbolize, you can help save the freedom mankind is so unhappily losing. I have a profound lesson to teach, and I can teach this lesson better than an automobile or an airplane or a mechanical dishwasher because I am seemingly so simple. Simple, yet not a single person on the face of this earth knows how to take me. This sounds fantastic, doesn't it? Especially when you realize that there are about 1.5 billion of my kind. What exactly is the author trying to say, my kind? Pick me up and look me over. What do you see? Not much meets the eye. There is some wood, the printed labeling, graphite lead, a bit of metal, and eraser. What exactly this is referring to, people? Graphite lead, it's a pencil, right? Wood, so there is a wood, and in that you have a graphite lead, you have some label, and then there is basically the metal and eraser out at the end. So this is nothing but a pencil. I in the passage is most likely referring to what? So you have to just use the options to arrive at the answer. I is not the author, people, because he says I appear to be very simple. I merit your wonder. The author says that though I am a very simple thing, I need your wonder. I need your curiosity and awe. And that I is not the author. That is basically the thing mentioned at the last, and that is the pencil. A very simple question. This question need not even be discussed. It's such a simple question. What is a supercilious attitude in the passage? The author says that wherever you have the word arrogant coming in, that becomes the answer. Look, arrogance of treating simple things as trivial. Straight away you fit it. The failure to perceive the mystery is not the arrogance, but treating something simple, treating all things simple as trivial as commonplace is basically arrogance, because the author says there is a degree of wonder in those simple things as well. And if you don't have that wonder for those simple things, you are basically being arrogant, and that's why 2 is the right choice. One of these easiest passages of all, not even worth discussing, I would say. Now let's go to the last passage, because the passage which is there at the end of this is a very difficult passage, and I would be discussing only this passage, and this basically would mark the end of the session. Why? Because I am not going to solve all the questions. Out of 24 questions, if you are a very good student, you would not be able to solve more than 20 if you go through them carefully, right? You may solve all the questions, but the last passage was a very difficult passage, and I found all the questions very difficult. So if I were in the shoes of the student, I would not attempt the last passage. I would attempt the VA part, which had 12 questions. I would attempt the first RC, which had 3 questions, and I would attempt the second RC, which has 2 questions, which had 2 questions. So 17 questions I have already attempted. I would give a try to this passage as well, and then basically close my section and go to the next section. Some psychologists and sociologists believe that psychopathy can be an asset in business and politics, and that as a result, psychopathic traits are overrepresented among successful people. So some people believe that psychopathy can be an asset. This would be a puzzle if it were so. If our moral feelings evolved through natural selection, then it shouldn't be the case that one would flourish without them. In fact, the successful psychopath is probably the exception. Psychopaths have certain deficits. Some of these are subtle. The psychologist Abigail Marsh and her colleagues find that psychopaths are markedly insensitive to the expression of fear. Normal people recognize fear and treat it as a distress cue, but psychopaths have problems seeing it. I don't know, this is I think not a part of the passage. But psychopaths have problems seeing it, let alone responding to it. Other deficits run deeper. The overall lack of moral sentiments might turn out to be psychopaths' downfall. We non-psychopaths are constantly assessing one another, looking for kindness and shame and the like. The psychopath has to pretend to be one of us, but this is difficult. It's hard to force yourself to comply with moral rules just through a rational appreciation of what you are expected to do. If you feel like strangling the cat, it's struggle to hold back just because you know it is frowned upon. Without a normal allotment of shame, guilt, psychopaths succumb to bad impulses, doing terrible things out of malice, and sooner or later they get caught. While psychopaths can be successful in the short term, they tend to fail in the long term and often end up in prison or worse. Let's take a closer look at what separates psychopaths from the rest of us. They are there are many symptoms of psychopathy, including pathological lying and lack of remorse or guilt. But the core deficit is indifference towards suffering of other people. Psychopaths lack compassion, the author says. To understand how compassion works for all of us, it is all of us non-psychopaths, it is important to distinguish it from empathy. Now, some contemporary researchers use the terms interchangeably, but there is a big difference, the author says, between compassion and empathy. And if you further go down, it says here that it's a long passage, by the way. I am too much of an adaptationist to think that a capacity as rich as empathy exists as a freak accident. So the author says that empathy does not exist as accident. It is most likely it has a function, and the most plausible candidate here is that it motivates us to care about others. Empathy exists to motivate compassion and altruism. Still, the link between empathy and compassion is more nuanced than people believe. First, although empathy can be automatic and unconscious, so the author is describing lots of things, and I have just understood what the author exactly has in mind: empathy, compassion, and all those things. So I would read the first question and see what exactly the author has in mind. It says here, the core deficit of psychopaths affect their long-term success. Why? So the core deficit of psychopath affects long-term success because natural selection enables moral feelings. Empathy is essential for long-term success. They cannot hide their lack of compassion for long. They are less likely to execute. This is again is a irrational option, because not all psychopaths are HR managers, and the author is not having managerial thing in mind. They cannot sustain the behavior. So they cannot sustain the behavior, bad behavior, and therefore they will not have long-term success. If they cannot sustain bad behavior, they should have long-term success. But again, what kind of behavior is not highlighted? So if you look at this, the deficit of psychopaths is that they cannot hide their lack of compassion for long. And the answer is visible here in the second paragraph. If you scroll up, you'll find that that it is given here that, and sooner or later they get caught. While psychopaths can be successful in the short term, they tend to fail in the long term and often end up in prison or worse. How they are successful in the long term? How they are successful in the short term? Because it says sooner or later they get caught. That means they're not able to hide. And what they cannot hide? The lack of feeling or compassion. And the answer is 3. They cannot hide the lack of compassion for long. They definitely get caught at some point or the other. And that is the reason why they cannot have long-term success. 3 is the right answer. Use options, people. It is not a difficult question. Which of the following options is correct according to the author? Compassion exists for a reason. Empathy is not a chance event. The author has said here, if you look at the second last paragraph, the first sentence, the author has said categorically that I am too much of an adaptionist to think that a capacity as rich as empathy is a freak accident. It is not a freak accident. It is basically it has some kind of function. It's not accidentally coming in. So definitely we can kick out option 2. Empathy, again, the author has said, is not a cause. So if you read the same paragraph, the author has said that empathy is not a cause of anything. I will just go up and I will show you where exactly. It says here that its most likely function and the most plausible candidate here is that motivates us to care about others. Empathy exists to motivate compassion. So empathy is a cause of something rather than becoming a cause of something. So empathy is not a cause of something. See, the option says here, empathy is the cause of moral choice. Empathy is not the cause of moral choice. Basically, empathy is basically the cause of compassion. It is empathy that motivates us for compassion. So if you look at this option, this is again not exactly the way it should be. Caring for others is psychopathy. How can you say caring for others is psychopathy? The author says it is compassion. So fourth and 2 option and 4 option are the first to go out. Long-term success is a freak accident. How can the author say long-term success is a freak accident? Long-term success comes to those only who are basically, having this kind of. The author would not agree with this kind of statement, and nowhere is it the core idea of the passage. So basically, we are left with option 1 by elimination. Empathy is the cause of not moral choice, but empathy is the cause of basically compassion. Option 1 is the best choice. Let's go down here and see if we can solve some more questions. A student approached a faculty pleading to increase. So I will just, this is an easy question, people. This is a very simple question. And I always tell the student that at least read the question, people, because if you read the question, you definitely have a good chance of getting the question correct. So it says here that, I will just read it for, I will just put it up here. A student approached a faculty pleading to increase his marks because failure is on one more subject because failure in one more subject will result in the student having to leave the program. The faculty said, I am sorry, but I cannot change your grades as it would be unfair to others. In the given circumstance, which of the following best describes the faculty? The faculty was both the faculty was not unfair. In fact, the authors say he was fair. And the faculty was not a psychopath because he is not causing any kind of harm. The faculty was compassionate, maybe. The faculty displayed empathy but not compassion. Now, why did he display empathy? He says, I am sorry. So definitely he's empathetic. And therefore, fifth also goes out. The fact that he said, I am sorry means that he had empathy. At the same time, I cannot change your grades. Why? Because that would mean he is unfair to others. So he definitely showed empathy. So the faculty displayed empathy, no doubt about it. The faculty displayed empathy, this must be there, but not compassion. Why? Because the action was not taken. Empathy and compassion, empathy motivates compassion. This is what the author says in the passage. Empathy motivates compassion. So when you empathize, you take a step, you become compassionate, you do something. So the author was empathetic, but he was not compassionate. Why? Because he did not increase the grades. Fourth is the best choice out of all the choices. You can either choose 2 because he was, of course, this is also positive, and you can choose either 4. But if you look at the passage, compassion is basically resulting into practical action. And the author says empathy motivates compassion. So the fact that he felt for the student shows that he was empathetic, but he did not do anything to avoid being unfair to others, shows that he was also, he was not compassionate. So 4 is the best choice and the right answer. So out of the whole paper, we have solved 20 questions and not more than 4 questions can be categorized as difficult. You could have easily managed to solve 13 questions and get all these questions correct confidently. We should have mean a decent percentile, 94, 95 percentile.